Braveheart. Mel Gibson's Braveheart is the kind of epic that makes you want to grab a rusty sword, paint your face like a smurf, and scream, "Freedom," until your neighbors call the cops. But as history, it's almost comically inaccurate. William Wallace, the Scottish hero of the 13th century, did fight against English rule, but very little in the film matches actual records. For starters, Wallace wasn't a poor farmer. He was a minor nobleman. His romance with Princess Isabella of France? Impossible. She was only a child at the time and never met Wallace. The kilts the Scots proudly wear throughout the movie, they didn't exist in Scotland until centuries later. Even Wallace's famous blue-faced paint is more Celtic tradition than Scottish. The film also exaggerated his role in the fight for independence, downplaying the contributions of other leaders like Robert the Bruce. So what got it wrong? Almost everything, except for the spirit of rebellion. Braveheart is an incredible movie, but as a true story, it's a fantasy. Scotland's past rewritten for Hollywood spectacle. Pocahontas. Disney's Pocahontas gave children a romanticized version of history, a Native American princess who fell in love with English settler John Smith and brought peace between their peoples. The real story is much darker. Pocahontas was about 10 or 11 when she met Smith. There was no romance. Later, she was kidnapped by the English, converted to Christianity, and married John Rolfe, not John Smith. The film also depicted harmonious resolution, with Pocahontas heroically saving Smith from execution. In reality, colonization led to violence, suffering, and cultural destruction. Pocahontas' life was one of survival under immense pressure, not Disney magic. What it got wrong was nearly everything. It turned tragedy into a love story for children. The Founder. The Founder tells the story of Ray Kroc, the man who turned McDonald's into a global empire. Michael Keaton plays him as both visionary and ruthless, showing how he seized control from the McDonald brothers. While largely accurate, the film takes liberties. The timeline of events was compressed, making it seem like Kroc immediately built an empire. The real process was slower and more complex. The McDonald brothers weren't as naive as portrayed. They were sharp businessmen who understood their product, even if they lacked Kroc's expansion drive. The film also dramatized confrontations, adding flair to what were mostly legal and financial maneuvers. The core truth stands: Kroc outmaneuvered the brothers and took credit for their vision, but the movie got it wrong by making him into a lone wolf genius rather than part of a long, messy business struggle. 300. Zack Snyder's 300 is pure cinematic spectacle. Slow-motion battles, ripped warriors, and Gerard Butler screaming like he's auditioning for the world's angriest motivational speaker. It claims to tell the story of the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans stood against the Persian army. But the film is more fantasy than history. First, the Spartans weren't alone. Historical accounts show they had thousands of Greek allies. The Persians weren't monsters with claws, giants, and mutants. They were skilled soldiers with advanced strategies. Even Xerxes, the Persian king, wasn't the towering, godlike figure covered in piercings. He was a human king, and his army, while vast, wasn't the otherworldly horde shown in the film. The Spartans themselves were not pure. Their society was brutal, built on slavery and a military obsession that makes boot camp look like a spa day. The film's mistakes come from stylizing a true battle into a comic book fantasy. It's not really history, it's mythology, designed to make the Spartans look like superheroes. The real story is fascinating enough, but Snyder gave us a war comic brought to life. A Beautiful Mind. Russell Crowe's portrayal of mathematician John Nash in A Beautiful Mind made schizophrenia a household word, and the film won Best Picture for its moving story. But it heavily reworked Nash's life. The movie showed Nash experiencing vivid visual hallucinations like imaginary people who guided or deceived him. In reality, Nash's schizophrenia mostly manifested as auditory hallucinations and paranoid delusions, not seeing entire characters. The film also skipped over the more uncomfortable parts of Nash's personal life, including his strained relationship with his wife Alicia and allegations of difficult behavior during his illness. Hollywood instead crafted a redemptive love story where Alicia never leaves him, when in fact, they divorced for years before later reconciling. Even Nash's career was smoothed out. His long struggles and setbacks were condensed into a neat arc of downfall and triumph. So what did it get wrong? The messy, complex humanity of John Nash. His real story was inspiring, but also complicated and painful. The movie gave us an elegant version, one that fit neatly into a Hollywood ending. Captain Phillips. Tom Hanks gave a powerhouse performance in Captain Phillips, the story of a cargo ship captain taken hostage by Somali pirates in 2009. The film presented Phillips as a calm, heroic leader who protected his crew at all costs. Hollywood sold us a real-life Captain America minus the shield, plus a lifeboat. But the crew members themselves told a different story. Several sued the shipping company afterward, claiming Phillips ignored repeated warnings about pirate attacks and steered the ship into dangerous waters. They painted him as reckless rather than heroic, saying he wasn't the selfless protector shown on screen. The film also downplayed the crew's role in saving themselves. In reality, they managed to disable the ship and capture one of the pirates, actions crucial to their survival. Hollywood, however, pushed Phillips to the center of the narrative, making him the lone hero. And those pirates? The film paints them as cartoonish bad guys, twirling their mustaches and cackling. Truth is, many were dirt-poor young men tangled in a messy web of corruption and desperation. Not exactly the Blackbeard fan club Hollywood cooked up. The movie got the broad strokes right. Yes, there was a hijacking, but the details? Those were bent to make one man shine. The Conjuring. Marketed as based on the true case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, The Conjuring terrified audiences with the haunting of the Perron family. But the line between truth and fiction is blurry here. Yes, the Perrons claimed their Rhode Island home was haunted in the 1970s. And yes, the Warrens investigated. But many of the film's scariest events, possessions, levitations, demonic confrontations come from Hollywood, not history. The Perron daughters have given mixed accounts over the years, with some admitting that the haunting stories grew in the retelling. Historians found no evidence of a witch named Bathsheba Sherman who cursed the land, as the movie claims. And critics argue the Warrens themselves were more showmen than scientists, often exaggerating cases. What the movie got wrong was simple. It turned folklore and hearsay into fact. The haunting may have felt real to the Perrons, but the demonic showdown was pure fiction. American Sniper. Clint Eastwood's American Sniper brought Chris Kyle's story to the big screen, turning him into a symbol of American heroism. The film shows Kyle as the deadliest sniper in America's history, struggling with the weight of war and its aftermath. It's intense, emotional, and patriotic. But the accuracy? It's complicated. Kyle's military record is real. He was indeed an accomplished sniper. But the movie fabricated key elements. The main villain, the Butcher, was entirely fictional, created to give Kyle a personal nemesis. The rival sniper, Mustafa, is exaggerated as well. He existed, but never had the dramatic duels shown in the film. Even Kyle's home life was streamlined into neat arcs of tension and reconciliation, ignoring the deeper messiness of PTSD and marital strain. Critics also noted how the film glossed over the broader context of the Iraq War, reducing complex politics into a good versus evil narrative. The truth? Kyle was a remarkable soldier, but not the lone gunman in a Western-style showdown. The movie turned a real man's life into a simplified myth, stripping away nuance in favor of drama. Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody was a smash hit, celebrating Queen and Freddie Mercury with electrifying performances and that unforgettable Live Aid finale. But as a true story, it played fast and loose with reality. The biggest issue, Mercury's AIDS diagnosis was moved to before Live Aid, making the concert his triumphant swan song. In truth, he wasn't diagnosed until 2 years after that performance. The shift was designed for emotional punch, but it twisted the timeline. The movie also rewrote the band's history. Queen never broke up before Live Aid, as the film suggested they were touring and recording steadily. Freddie wasn't a lonely, estranged figure begging his bandmates to reunite. They were always together. Even his relationship with Mary Austin was reshaped into a near fairy tale, glossing over Mercury's deeper struggles with identity and loneliness. The truth is, Freddie's life didn't need Hollywood rewriting. He was already extraordinary, bold, complex, and brilliant. By sanding down the rough edges, the film gave us a feel-good version of Mercury, but not the full man. Rudy. Rudy is the ultimate underdog sports movie, telling the story of Rudy Ruettiger's dream of playing football at Notre Dame. The film shows him as an untalented but relentless kid who finally gets his moment of glory. While Rudy did suit up for one play in 1975 and recorded a sack, the movie took plenty of liberties. In reality, Rudy wasn't quite the weakling portrayed on screen. He was a solid athlete, just undersized. His teammates didn't all rally dramatically to get him on the field. The famous laying down jersey scene never happened. The big speech from the coach? Fiction. Rudy did work incredibly hard, but the Hollywood version made him a saintly figure, glossing over his flaws. The truth is inspiring, yes, but less of a fairy tale. The movie got it wrong by making perseverance look like a Hollywood miracle instead of years of small, gritty effort. The Greatest Showman. Audiences loved The Greatest Showman for its music, color, and energy. But as a biography of P.T. Barnum, it's almost pure fiction. Hugh Jackman's Barnum is shown as a visionary who championed diversity, lifting up people's society cast aside. But the real Barnum was far more controversial. Historically, Barnum exploited people with disabilities and people of color for profit. He marketed Joyce Heth, an enslaved woman, as George Washington's 161-year-old nurse, and he routinely presented freak shows that dehumanized performers. The film ignores this, and instead paints him as a benevolent ringmaster spreading joy. Even the central romance subplot and Barnum's near downfall were inventions to make him more sympathetic. The movie got it wrong by sanitizing Barnum's story into a glittering musical fantasy. He was indeed a showman, but also a manipulator and businessman who profited from exploitation. The truth is messy, but Hollywood gave us a tale about acceptance that Barnum himself never fully embodied. The Perfect Storm. The Perfect Storm tells the tragic story of the Andrea Gale, a fishing boat lost at sea in 1991. The film builds up the crew as rugged underdogs before throwing them into towering waves and certain death. It's gripping, but the truth is, nobody knows what happened. The Andrea Gale and its crew disappeared. Their final moments are a mystery. The film invents nearly every scene on the boat during the storm, from their dialogue to their desperate struggle. Even the monstrous rogue wave that flips the ship is speculation. The Coast Guard rescue missions shown in the movie did happen, but not in the way they intersect with the Andrea Gale's fate. What it got wrong wasn't one detail, it was the entire ending. Hollywood filled in the blanks of history with pure fiction, giving closure where there was none. The real truth is far sadder. The ocean swallowed the ship, and the crew's last hours remain unknowable. Hacksaw Ridge. The movie tells the unbelievable story of Desmond Doss, a World War II medic who saved 75 men without ever carrying a gun. It's inspiring and mostly true. But the film still bent history for effect. The battle scenes are stretched into a non-stop slaughter, with waves of enemies charging recklessly at Doss and his comrades. In reality, the fighting was brutal, but less cinematic. The movie also exaggerated Doss's isolation from his unit. While some soldiers did doubt him, many respected his convictions. His wife Dorothy is portrayed as constantly supportive, but in truth, their relationship had struggles not shown on screen. And the figure of 75 rescued soldiers, that number comes from Doss himself. Others estimated lower. Still, the core of the story is accurate. Doss was a hero. Where the movie got it wrong was in framing his life like an action film rather than a slow, painful grind of courage and faith. The truth needed no exaggeration, but Hollywood couldn't resist heightening the drama. The Social Network. David Fincher's The Social Network is one of the most compelling dramas of the century, turning the founding of Facebook into a Shakespearean tale of ambition and betrayal. Jesse Eisenberg's Mark Zuckerberg is brilliant but socially awkward, driven by heartbreak and jealousy. It's gripping, but it's not really what happened. For starters, Zuckerberg didn't create Facebook to get back at an ex-girlfriend. That dramatic opening breakup? Fiction. He was already dating Priscilla Chan, who later became his wife, while he was building Facebook. The film also exaggerated Eduardo Saverin's betrayal, painting him as a saintly victim. In reality, the business fallout was more complex and legalistic. And while Sean Parker was indeed flamboyant, Justin Timberlake's portrayal amplified his influence on Zuckerberg far beyond what history shows. What the movie got wrong was intent. Zuckerberg wasn't some jilted nerd trying to win love. He was a sharp entrepreneur who saw an opportunity. The film distilled messy corporate battles into a tight narrative of friendship lost, which made for incredible drama but left the truth behind. The Wolf of Wall Street. Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street is wild, hilarious, and shocking, showing Jordan Belfort's rise as a corrupt stockbroker drowning in drugs, sex, and money. But while it's based on Belfort's own memoir, that's exactly where the trouble lies. Belfort himself is the source, and con men don't usually make the most reliable narrators. The movie exaggerates his exploits, making his frauds seem larger than life and often glamorous. Some infamous moments like the yacht sinking while carrying millions in cash are true, but others, like Quaalude-fueled car crashes or extravagant parties, are either embellished or unverified. The film also downplayed the real victims of Belfort's schemes. Thousands of ordinary people lost their life savings, but the movie frames much of his downfall as comedic chaos. So, what did it get wrong? By following Belfort's own storytelling, it let him shape his myth as an outlaw anti-hero. The truth wasn't funny, it was destructive. Hollywood turned a fraudster into a rock star. Remember the Titans. Few sports movies hit the heart like Remember the Titans. The story of a newly integrated high school football team overcoming racial tensions in 1970s Virginia felt inspirational, uniting audiences everywhere. But the reality was much less dramatic. The movie depicts a town torn apart by racism, with players initially refusing to work together until their coach, Herman Boone, unites them. In reality, integration in Alexandria was relatively smooth compared to what's shown on screen. The Titans weren't massive underdogs either. They were an already talented squad who dominated the season, going undefeated. Their championship win was hard-fought, yes, But it wasn't the miracle against all odds Hollywood suggested. The personal conflicts, locker room fights, and gradual bonding were exaggerated to heighten the drama. Coach Boone himself was more controversial than the saint-like leader portrayed by Denzel Washington. So what got it wrong? The movie turned a strong team and a real community achievement into a dramatic morality play. The truth was already uplifting, but Hollywood made it a fable. The greatest game ever played. This golf drama tells the story of Francis Ouimet, a working-class kid who shocked the world by winning the 1913 U.S. Open against seasoned professionals. The film nails the inspirational tone but adds Hollywood seasoning. Ouimet's rivalry with Harry Vardon was real, but their personal relationship was dramatized. The film portrays Ouimet as constantly underestimated, yet he had already shown talent in amateur tournaments. The biggest exaggeration is the working-class hero versus elite snobs framing. While class tension existed, Ouimet wasn't quite the outcast painted on screen. He had local support and encouragement. The golf matches themselves were filmed for maximum tension, adding crowd drama and near misses that didn't unfold so perfectly in real life. The truth was already remarkable, an amateur teenager beating the best pros, but Hollywood made it a neatly packaged fairy tale. The Patriot. Mel Gibson strikes again with The Patriot, a Revolutionary War epic about Benjamin Martin, a farmer-turned-warrior who leads militias against the British. But Benjamin Martin never existed. He's a composite character loosely inspired by Francis Marion, a guerrilla fighter. The problem? The movie scrubs away Marion's darker legacy. In reality, Marion was a slave owner who fought brutally in the South. The film skips over that, instead making Martin a noble widower fighting for freedom. The British are portrayed as cartoon villains, committing massacres like burning civilians inside churches, atrocities that never actually happened. The revolution was messy, filled with contradictions, but the movie turned it into a simple story of good versus evil. What it got wrong was not just accuracy, but honesty. It painted the American cause as pure while erasing its ugly truths. Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia is hailed as one of the greatest films ever made. Its sweeping deserts and Peter O'Toole's magnetic performance cemented T.E. Lawrence as a legend. But the real Lawrence wasn't the lone hero Hollywood portrayed. The movie suggests he almost single-handedly united Arab tribes against the Ottoman Empire, but in truth, the Arab revolt involved many leaders and factions. Lawrence was a participant, not the sole orchestrator. The film also exaggerated his eccentricity, painting him as a near-mystical figure who enjoyed pain and glory. While Lawrence did write dramatically about himself, historians believe he embellished his own image, and the movie leaned into that myth. Arab leaders like Faisal were reduced to side characters when they were in fact central to the revolt. The truth is, Lawrence was important, yes, but not the desert messiah of legend. The movie got it wrong by letting myth overshadow collective history. The Sound of Music. The Sound of Music gave us unforgettable songs and Julie Andrews twirling in the Alps. It also gave us a romanticized version of the Von Trapp family's escape from Nazi Austria. The real story? Much less dramatic. For starters, Maria Von Trapp didn't fall madly in love with Captain Von Trapp at first sight. She was originally hired as a tutor, and their marriage was more practical than passionate, though love did grow over time. The family didn't hike over the mountains into Switzerland, as the iconic ending shows. In reality, they boarded a train and quietly left Austria for Italy, then America. The children weren't as perfectly harmonious as shown either. Some disliked performing at first. The truth was about a resourceful family navigating danger, but Hollywood made it a fairy tale escape. The movie got it wrong by replacing quiet resilience with musical spectacle, but it made for unforgettable cinema. The Revenant. The Revenant put Leonardo DiCaprio through cinematic hell. Frozen rivers, brutal fights, and, of course, that infamous bear attack. It's based on the real frontiersman Hugh Glass, who survived a mauling in 1823 and crawled hundreds of miles back to safety. That much is true, but the movie adds plenty of fiction. For one, Glass didn't have a son, Native American or otherwise. That entire revenge subplot, his quest to avenge his murdered boy, was invented to drive the narrative. The bear attack itself was accurate, but the length and gore were ramped up. In reality, Glass didn't slaughter his betrayers in a climactic showdown. He forgave them after recovering. His story was about survival, not vengeance. The film got it wrong by turning a tale of grit into a revenge epic. Hugh Glass's real achievement was endurance, crawling over rough terrain with broken bones. That alone was incredible. But Hollywood wanted something bloodier, darker, and more dramatic. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When people first walked out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974, they were not just terrified. They were disturbed in a way horror rarely achieved before. The marketing had done its job brilliantly. This is based on a true story. Suddenly, Leatherface wasn't just a character. He was the guy you swore you saw lurking at the gas station on your last road trip. Audiences left theaters clutching their popcorn buckets, half convinced they'd just watched a documentary on rural Texas's worst Airbnb experience. But here's the truth. No chainsaw-wielding family ever terrorized rural Texas. Director Tobe Hooper did take inspiration from reality, but it's not what you think. The core of Leatherface's disturbing behavior, like wearing masks of human skin, was lifted from the crimes of Ed Gein, a Wisconsin weirdo from the 1950s who had a side hustle robbing graves and playing arts and crafts with human remains. Terrifying? Yes, but not the same as chasing screaming teenagers with a roaring chainsaw. In fact, the core idea for the movie came when one day Hooper visited a mall with his wife, and the crowd in front of him made him imagine taking a chainsaw and killing every one of them. The true story label worked like a psychological trick. It blurred fact and fiction, making audiences feel unsafe even after the credits rolled. What's fascinating is how completely people bought into it. Many still believe Leatherface was a real, active serial killer. The chainsaw murders never happened. The family dinner scene, the meat hook, the frantic escape, those were pure invention, designed to shock and unsettle. And that's why the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remains one of the greatest cinematic lies ever told. Scary not because it was real, but because it convinced us it could be. The Blind Side. The Blind Side melted hearts worldwide with its story of Michael O'Hare, a homeless teen taken in by the wealthy Tuohy family, who then nurtured him into an NFL star. It felt like a miracle story of kindness and triumph, the kind of thing you want to believe in. But reality was far messier. The movie sold us Michael O'Hare as a football newbie, practically needing the Tuohys to show him which end of the ball to kick. O'Hare himself called BS on this, saying he was already slinging blocks like a pro before the Tuohys rolled up in their shiny SUV. Hollywood just couldn't resist the clueless giant needs saving storyline. Because who doesn't love a good underdog montage? What's worse, years later, O'Hare revealed shocking details. He was never legally adopted. Instead, the Tuohys placed him under a conservatorship, which allowed them to profit from his life story, including the best-selling book and film. Suddenly, the feel-good movie started looking like a masterclass in exploitation. The real Michael O'Hare wasn't a helpless giant molded into greatness. He was a determined athlete whose story was reshaped to fit Hollywood's favorite narrative, the white saviors who rescue the underdog. The film gave us a heartwarming fantasy, but the truth? It robbed O'Hare of his agency and turned a complex reality into a one-note fairy tale. The Pursuit of Happyness. Few movies inspire like The Pursuit of Happyness. Watching Will Smith as Chris Gardner struggle through homelessness while raising his young son and then finally land a stockbroker job feels like the ultimate American dream. And yes, Chris Gardner is a real man, and he really did climb from poverty to Wall Street success. But Hollywood trimmed and polished the story until it gleamed, leaving out the uncomfortable details. For starters, that adorable toddler stealing your heart in the film? Total fiction. Gardner's son was practically a teenager during the rough times, not a tiny tyke clutching a basketball. The film made him younger to maximize emotional impact. Gardner also wasn't just an innocent victim of circumstances. His relationships and choices were way worse in real life than you think. He already had a daughter from his previous relationship, but for some reason, this part was cut out from the film. His arrest in the film seems like bad luck, but in reality, Gardner spent time in jail for unpaid parking tickets. The timeline of his rise was also stretched. Success didn't come overnight. By condensing years of effort into a montage, the film made perseverance look like a miracle. The truth? Gardner's story is inspiring, but not because it was magical. It was because it was messy, slow, and full of mistakes, just like real life. And the real-life Gardner even gave a cameo at the end of the film. The Exorcist. When The Exorcist hit theaters in 1973, people fainted, threw up, and in some cases, ran out crying. The terror wasn't just from the spinning heads and pea soup vomit. It was from the opening line, based on a true story. Suddenly, every creak in your house was a demon plotting to yeet your soul into the void. But here's the truth. The real case was much different. The story was inspired by a boy known as Roland Doe, or Robbie Mannheim, who underwent a Catholic exorcism in the late 1940s. Witnesses claimed strange events occurred like beds shaking, objects flying. But most of it was, my cousin's friend's uncle said so. Kind of gossip, not exactly court-admissible evidence. The movie cranked everything up to a certain level. Roland didn't twist his head 360 degrees. He didn't crawl backward down the stairs like a spider. Oh, and get this, Roland wasn't even a girl. The filmmakers swapped him out for Regan because, apparently, possessed underage girls sells more tickets. In reality, many think Roland was wrestling with psychological trauma, not Satan's possession. Yet, by slapping on true story, the movie planted the seed of fear so deep that people still debate whether demons are real. The Exorcist became a cultural juggernaut not because demons were real, but because Hollywood sold the sizzle with a side of, this could totally happen to you. And we believed it could happen. Catch me if you can. Leonardo DiCaprio as Frank Abagnale Jr. made con artistry look thrilling, romantic, even heroic. The movie claimed Abagnale was a teenage genius who successfully posed as a pilot, doctor, and lawyer, outsmarting the FBI at every turn. It was so outrageous it had to be true, right? Well, not exactly. Much of Abagnale's tale comes from Abagnale himself. Over the years, journalists and investigators discovered that many of his wildest claims were exaggerated or outright false. For example, there's little evidence he actually flew planes for Pan Am, nor that he performed surgeries or taught at a law school. The FBI agent who supposedly chased him, Carl Hanratty, is a composite character created for the film. In reality, Abagnale spent more time in jail than outsmarting authorities. The movie transformed a con man into a charming legend, but in doing so, it played into the greatest con of all, letting Abagnale shape his own myth. What got it wrong wasn't just the facts. It was the idea that his lies were glamorous, when in reality, they were much smaller, much pettier, and far less cinematic. The real con? Letting Frank write his own legend, and we all fell for it. Green Book. Green Book won the Oscar for Best Picture, but it quickly became one of the most debated true story films in recent memory. On screen, we see Tony Lip Vallelonga, a tough Italian-American bouncer, driving Dr. Don Shirley, a brilliant black pianist, through the segregated South in the 1960s. The film frames it as a story of friendship overcoming racism. Sweet, right? But the real Don Shirley didn't agree. His family publicly criticized the movie, calling it full of inaccuracies. The biggest issue was how the film portrayed Shirley as isolated, uptight, and disconnected from black culture. In reality, Shirley had a close relationship with his family and community. The movie also painted Tony Lip as the heart of the journey, downplaying Shirley's dignity and resilience. Even the central friendship was exaggerated. They were cordial, but not lifelong best friends as the movie suggested. They didn't even share their numbers with one another. By simplifying racism into a road trip buddy comedy, the film glossed over the brutal realities Shirley faced. So, what went wrong? The truth got twisted into a shiny Oscar bait package, where racism is just a plot device for high fives and hugs. Green Book might make you feel warm and fuzzy, but the truth is not at all comfortable. The Imitation Game. The Imitation Game gave Alan Turing long overdue recognition, showing how he cracked the Nazi Enigma code during World War II. Benedict Cumberbatch played him brilliantly, but the movie bent facts for drama. For one, Turing didn't work alone with a ragtag team of outcasts. There were thousands of mathematicians, linguists, and engineers involved in the effort. The film also invented conflicts with his colleagues, making him seem more isolated and eccentric than he really was. One of the biggest inaccuracies was the suggestion that Turing had to keep his homosexuality secret only after the war. In reality, many close to him already knew. The film also implied he was blackmailed into silence about Enigma, when in truth, the whole project was classified for decades. And Joan Clark, played by Keira Knightley, was given a much larger romantic subplot than what existed. The real tragedy of Turing's life was already powerful, persecuted for being gay despite helping win the war, but Hollywood added artificial tension. The truth was extraordinary enough.